Hi there, I'm Susan Caruso. I'm the founder and the director of Sunflower Creative Arts in Delray Beach, Florida. And you're listening to the Sunflower Bridge podcast, where we talk about being with children.
And I'm Lindsey Mills, the co-creator of Sunflower Bridge. Take a breath and smile with us. It's nice to be here with you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about how children perceive time. And it's really easy for adults to be impatient with that or to not understand, wait, it's going to take us many hours to get to our destination, to get to Disneyland, Disney World. It's going to be hours. And
are we there yet?
Yes. Yeah. Or all of those things, that kind of concept of time. So it got us talking and thinking about how do kids perceive time, and when do they have a sense of time or sequencing, or just, even minutes or hours, or what that looks like. Mm-hmm. So we just started thinking about it and talking about it. And, what we've noticed at Sunflower is that lots of times children, when it's pickup time and, one of the teachers calls their name, your mom's here, they'll say, what? I haven't even been here that long. What? It's done already? What? That kind of a thing. And so I overheard, a camper say something along those lines. Why does it seem so long when we start out? When we come, or we think it's going to be a long time, but then all of a sudden we have to go home, and so that idea of what is that length of time? They don't really have a concept of that. But as we were talking, it's because they're in the zone, right. In the play zone. They're in their play zone, or adults, talk about being in the zone, and then. There is time gets disrupted. There is no sense of time. It's just, you're really in the moment, which is what we as adults are always trying to do, is to be that mindful, be in the moment, and lose that structure, that restriction, that being concerned about time.
Totally.
Or all of that happens. So, it's just so interesting, such an interesting topic to think about.
It is. I am reminded of the times before I understood time, and how that really is this process of socialization, of learning linear time instead of cyclical time, because I think to an extent cyclical time comes naturally to us. We the first inkling we get that time is happening, I would say, is night and day. And that is when many children become conscious of that there's a period of time when they are not awake and doing things. And so they can make that differentiation between that this is daytime and this is nighttime. And you introduced me to this concept of explaining lengths of time to children using sleeps.
Right, yeah. So a lot of times they'll say, or you can ask the question, is it a lot of sleeps until your next birthday, or is it just short, and they'll it's a lot of sleeps, oh no, it's really short, it's soon, not too many, 3 or 4 sleeps and that's it. And that depends on how old they are too. A 3-year-old isn't going to say that, but as their world becomes bigger, as they understand, and have experience with that, then it's a whole other story.
Although we have observed that many ages of children, even up to, preteens, will have a preoccupation with their birthday to the point where the day after their birthday, they are saying, it's almost my next birthday.
Yeah, I'm they just turned 12 and they'll say, you'll say a day or two later, so when is your birthday? Well, I'm almost 13.
Yeah.
I'm almost 13.
Right around the
I'm
corner.
almost 5. But usually it is in that older kid, 9, 10, 12, 13, and I do know a former sibling that probably still says that. Well, I'm almost 32. really cute. But I don't think she's in her 30s yet. No, she's not. I don't think so. Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of particulars when it comes to the formal idea of time, and there's all these different measurements, and it's zoomed in all the way to zoomed out. So I've noticed that there's this growing ability to understand minutes, hours, even days, because there are relevant information attached to those things. Like, for example, we're at the playground and it's getting to be time to go home. And what's the most common strategy for helping kids at that moment? We have 5 more minutes to play at the playground and then we're going to go home. And they begin to grasp 5 minutes because maybe you set a timer, and so they feel in their body while they're playing what 5 minutes feels like. But that's also very pliable when they're in the zone, like Susan was saying.
Yeah, and it's relative. It's even relative for the parents because they said 5 more minutes and then we start talking and then the kids know right away, they didn't really mean 5 minutes. You know, let's see, we probably have, whatever, a bigger amount of time.
Yeah.
But when you're consistent, I think they do really feel that, that this is what the amount of time we have left and when we need to get ready to go. So it's a really good thing to do. So I know that I remember being in middle school, and I've talked about this. I want you to share your story too. But when I was in middle school, I was 11, 12 years old, and started. I remember in science talking about infinity.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking about that for weeks. And being a little frightened by it and being a little blown away by it. Like infinity, that means it's endless, and these numbers are endless. They just keep going and going and going. And I remember working myself up to the point I thought, this could make somebody crazy. Yeah. I better stop thinking about this.
Totally. It's a massive abstract concept for a young kid. And when we did a little research about the development of our understanding of time, as far as psychology and what we can understand about human development at this point, there is the major arc is towards more abstract thinking from the more concrete understanding that you have from those minutes on the playground or an hour of the day when you always have dinner, right? Like there are these more concrete measurements, but then infinity is a concept that's unthinkable, inconceivable to our tiny brains, even as adults.
I still kind of feel that way.
Right. As a teenager, you were on the cusp of your teen years having that thought. I remember being in those science classes and trying to imagine infinity and the universe expanding out forever. And I would, in my mind, picture stars and blackness, and it's all flying at me. And then all of a sudden it's white. And I would just hit this wall, so to speak, in my mind where I just couldn't imagine what came after. Because at a certain point, we don't know.
Yeah, it's really. I would be really curious to see how any of our viewers might be thinking about that and what the. The other thing that we found is there's not a whole lot of research about it. There's some research going on right now with children and time, but there's much less research than we thought that we would find. So that was interesting. So I'm curious if anybody out there had the same kind of feeling like, it's going to make you crazy, or, having that real visual sense and feeling of zooming through time and then hitting that burst of whiteness. It's a curious thing for sure.
I am also now reminded of the kind of abstract conception of time that children have before they know any of the rules about it, and how even if something is more than a year ago, for example, like for a young child, I've noticed a lot of times they'll say, oh, when I was a baby. It doesn't matter how old they were. If it happened before their recent past, they consider that like, oh, that's totally when I was a baby. Whereas they also have this idea you've told me about adults
the whole
becoming
big
babies.
picture of time is you start out as a baby, and then you grow and you grow and grow and you get older and older. They kind of get that, when no sooner than 5, that I've noticed, and usually around 5 and older, in between there, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, but the young children look at it as this cycle of you're a baby and you get old and then you come back to being a baby again.
Yeah.
And so I've had so many kids say to me, like, when you're a baby again,
So
Susan, then, I'll take care of you, that kind of thing. So that's really interesting too, because that makes sense to them.
Right.
And even with how you are as you get older, you do start taking those steps back. Oh, I can't walk anymore. Somebody needs to feed me. I'm sleeping a lot. All those kinds of things. And they're not really, when they're talking about it, they're not really, seeing that happen. Maybe they are, because it's just too consistent for them to be talking about it. And so it's just some kind of sense they have at being human. It's not like they're learning it somewhere. It's like it's a very instinctual thing, because they talk about it so much of the time.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting.
To bring it back to kind of our everyday experience and how we as adults being with children might experience time, I like to remember, this is part of the reason I've always been drawn to working with children, I think, is because as an adult, I have, out of necessity, a lot of times had to be obsessed with time and had to, or taken on a lot of stress about time and what I have to do and how much time I have to do it. And that can become, a source of anxiety. But children have such presence. They have this incredible ability to remain locked in the moment and not obsessing about the past or planning for the future, as I, in my adulthood, often find myself doing.
Right, and we do have an adult experience of that if we're playing like children do, because, some definitions of play are when there is no time, when you're not measuring time, you don't even feel the time passed, and we call it being in the zone too. And so athletes and, it's just been a real topic of interest over the past, probably 20 years, being in the zone, that kind of a thing. When it's so freeing, and so we can remember what that feels like from our playing days, and I think that's why children, why we all need to play all the time, but to have that freeing, it's so stress free, so you're so focused on this one pursuit, and there's not all the chatter and not all the worry or the anxiety or anything. It's just, wow, you're in the zone. So, and we want to feel that much more. There are times, of course, when you can't. There are time restrictions. But when you can, when you have the time, we need to remember to do it. Be in the zone as adults.
Yeah, and kind of using the trick of allowing your child to lighten the mood. Letting their childlike energy diffuse that tension you might have around wanting the time to go by. I think that's the best guidance, I have for myself in a day when the time is just ticking by so slowly. In those cases, I'm paying too much attention to the clock, and I'm wishing time would pass rather than looking around me for what is good and what can be enjoyed in this moment.
Really, that's a really good point, because I remember sitting in math class as a high school student, or then, even though now I love Shakespeare, but in a really boring Shakespeare class.
Oh, yeah.
And just looking at the clock, okay, we've got 20 more minutes, look at the clock, okay, and then you're suffering through, and then it's, 19 minutes before the class ends.
Totally.
And and to really, as adults, to take away those times when, why are we doing this to ourselves? And stressing out about time with children. There are times when you absolutely have to get out of the house and do all of that. But I remember you telling about a time when, a friend of yours said, okay, you're in your pajamas. It doesn't matter. You don't need to have your, all buttoned up with all kinds of other things. You can go to preschool in your pajamas.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. Why are we stressing about the time so much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, releasing control over minute details like what your kiddo wears to school on a Wednesday.
Especially preschool. Especially
preschool.
Sunflower. I remember one little guy who just graduated from high school, this particular person, and he, he had his pajamas on. His mother was trying to do exactly that. No, you can't go to school without your, with your pajamas on. You got to get your clothes on. And this little guy looked at his mom. He said, Miss Susan is not going to care what I have on. She's going to feel fine if I've got my pajamas on. And his mother took a breath, that's kind of what we would like people to do.
Yeah.
Took a breath and said, you're right, Let's just get into the car.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening today. To share your thoughts, feelings, and stories about being with children with us. We would love to hear them. And about time and time travel and manipulating time. You can send us an email at lindsey@sunflowercreativearts.org or find us on Instagram @sunflowercreativearts. The Sunflower Bridge podcast is kindly sponsored by Schweitzer Musical Productions.
This is their lovely studio. We're so grateful.
Take care.
See you next time.